So if you're just joining us,
we're embarking on an interesting topic.
We're in the middle of a conversation with Jeff Thompson, Beth Gustin, Robin Ennis.
Oh yeah, Wellness Wednesday with Beth and Robin. Gonna settle it down. Oh yeah, get your feet planted on the ground. Wellness Wednesday.
Yeah, okay. Well, then tell people in the field to hire me then. That's why
I usually would not get the job because it was, oh, you're not licensed yet. Or, oh, sorry, chose someone else and gave no reason as to why.
If you're unemployed, I would say take a job. But if you are in a position where you don't have to settle for a job,
don't forget not to sell yourself short. Unless, Jeff, did you think of anything?
No, I was trying to go further down this rabbit hole.
Oh, well, good. Let's go down the rabbit hole together.
That just might stay on the podcast. Well, I think people actually do go down the rabbit hole when they're into filling out applications, because if they're educated and they want to get a job and they're doing it cold, like just filling it out for 6, 7 different companies that they think would be interesting without knowing anybody, it is a hard road.
Yep.
So I would suggest to anybody that is looking for jobs is to look at internship possibilities or job fairs. Who do you know that's in these fields? Get to know them. What events are going on that might get you noticed? The cane alone will get you noticed. So if you show up at these events, you'll get noticed.
Right.
It could be a good thing. You stand out a little bit differently. They say, like, it's not who it's
not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah.
I think it's true. I think volunteering is also really helpful if you can, because you can start to show people, and again, I don't think we should have to do this, but you can have to show people like, hey, I can do this job.
Yep. That's what I had to, I volunteered until I found a job. And actually, maybe even in the podcast, if it's okay, I'll share some of my struggles finding employment.
I can do that too. This is the podcast though, right?
Yeah, we're moving.
Okay.
Welcome back to Wellness Wednesday. This is Beth Gustin, licensed professional counselor here in Colorado, and I am with my co-host Robin Ennis, a licensed clinical social worker, also here in Colorado. And we also have joining us today the amazing and wonderful Jeff Thompson, who is our typical behind-the-scenes person that does all the magic to bring this podcast to all of you. Yeah. So, welcome back. We missed you last time.
I know. I was going to say, I'm glad to be back. You and Jeff held down the fort.
We did.
Yeah. Yep.
And then scheduling was like impossible.
Yep.
That got challenging there for a minute.
But we made it.
Together.
We are here. Yep.
And we're going to discuss everyone's favorite topic, which is employment, or is it unemployment these days? I don't know. But it is October, which is Disability Employment Awareness Month. And so we thought it'd be a good topic to visit, or I guess revisit, because we did this a year ago as well. And
it's definitely a relevant topic, employment. It's always going to be something to talk about, especially with the new technology. We talked about, a few weeks ago, we talked about AI. And so how does AI impact, the job search? And so I'm finding with my clients that AI is actually creating a barrier in that realm, because it's taking the human aspect out of it. So when AI, there's certain terms that it'll pay attention to or be triggered by. And let's say that disability is one of them. And you work for an organization with the name disability or in the job description or whatever it may be. It may automatically weave out that resume because of some type of potential bias. So that's what I hear quite a few clients feel is what's happening to them. And so as a result, when they submit their job applications, which can be a daunting process within its own, because you have to submit hundreds or whatever it may be, they feel like they're losing out. They feel like they're not being considered because of AI.
I would agree with that. Whether you're sighted or visually impaired, I think the same problem is occurring. I would venture to suspect it could be higher depending on your work history and how, the companies you work for and the titles and job titles and things like that, and what words are being screened in or screened out. But I've heard this challenge from a lot of my clients, both visually impaired and sighted. I don't know how to get around that. I don't have any good tips for that. The other challenge I hear a lot about is it's like we're shouting into the void because there's no responses. You send out the application and you hear nothing. Was it received? Don't know. Did it get looked at? Don't know, because you don't hear any response. You may get the automated response that, that got received by a bot somewhere, but there's no feedback to know what the status of that sent application is. And so I think combined with all these things, it's a very discouraging process, I think, to find a job right now.
I think that void you're talking about is when you don't get the feedback. And one thing that I would suggest if someone is filling out an application is take a look at the job title, the description, and look for them keywords throughout there, and take all them keywords and put them down on a note, but have them ready. So when you're filling out your application, use those keywords. Like if they're looking for someone with Word as a requirement, must know Word, must know Excel, and you have those, make sure that you have that written down, weave that in. The weave that you put in is what the bots are going to be looking for. So if you can put as many things in that these bots are going to pick out, like, oh, this one has 9 out of 10. Let's move it over here. I think your attention to detail, what you put in there, is what you have to do because that's what they're doing.
I like that. That's a great idea. I didn't
Yeah.
think about that. I'm going to have to suggest that to some of my clients. That makes complete sense to do it that way.
I have heard that before, and I do tell my clients that, and I hope it helps because I think there's a lot of sense in that. If you can read the description and as much as you can in different words, but using the keywords, put that into your descriptions of what you've done in your previous jobs or your current job or in your cover letter, because some jobs still want those and some jobs don't. But weaving those in as much as you can while still sounding, you. And speaking true to your experiences of what you have done, I think it can help.
I was talking about this with somebody, but I missed the time when you had the option to submit your resume and cover letter electronically or take it in person to meet the person, so that they could put a face to the name.
Yeah.
That's really become obsolete, it seems like, having that in-person option to drop off something.
My first job that I got, there was a knock at the door, and this older gentleman, was looking for my younger brother to mow his yard. And he wasn't home. And he says, do you want to mow my yard? And I just paused for a second. He says, I'll give you $20 and a lunch. And I'm thinking, wow, $20. And this was back in, I don't know, 9th grade, 10th grade. Today, that'd be like $55. So I took that opportunity. I mowed his yard, and he said, you know what? You did a good job. We're looking for someone for the printing department. So by me mowing the guy's yard, doing a good job, he saw I was a good worker. He hired me down at FMC, which is down the road from me, used to be, and that led to a printing career for me. I printed the first Sports Illustrated swimsuit calendars the first 2 years when I was just 18, 19 years old on a 6-color Heidelberg press because I found a niche. He said, just fill out the application, blah, blah, blah. He swung by the next day and took it in. So it was who I knew. That guy found me. He didn't find me by looking at my application. He wanted me. He was going to process it and hire me. So anytime you have an opportunity, like Robin, you mentioned volunteering, anytime you have an opportunity to volunteer, that's a great opportunity to get your name known. Someone's going to remember you. And that's sometimes, no matter how many bots they got, knowing somebody can bypass that whole system.
It can. I think the other hard part is a lot of places discourage you from bringing it in person. And so it really does help if you know someone who could at least say, yeah, I'll tell my boss to keep an eye out for your resume, or go and send it directly to me. I will make sure that it gets in front of the right people. So it really does pay to make those connections. This is where networking, I think, comes back into play when looking for a job, because it is about those relationships, making connections, and who you know that can put a good word in for you, help you get your foot in the door, give you some leads.
Yep. Putting yourself out there.
Yeah, and that isn't easy. I get that. It's not easy, but I think especially when we're talking about the blind and visually impaired community, which has a very high unemployment rate, it is doing these, I don't want to say additional things to help us get hired. I had a very long road getting my first job after grad school in the field, and I ended up volunteering at 3 different locations, 3 of them at the same time for part of that 3 years, to the point that the licensing board, because I was going to get my licensure hours too, said, "You've got over 40 hours a week in volunteer experience. Please explain yourself." Which just spoke to the amount of volunteer work I was doing, but I'm grateful I did it all because it gave me good experience, and it ironically put me in front of someone where I applied for a job and they said, you're actually overqualified, but go talk to this person over here. And I did, and that led to a job at a Center for Independent Living, which was kind of the beginning of my in the field career, I guess you could say, many, many years ago.
I wholeheartedly admit a snarkiness about me when you mentioned that. When you mentioned, Beth, that Dora came at you and was like, yeah, explain yourself for the 40 hours. I'm like, yeah, okay, well then tell people in the field to hire me then. That's why I have. Yeah. So, it's unfortunate because it took me 6 years to be able to get my first job in social work. And I, like you, Beth, I volunteered at a few places to be able to get experience and to be able to network and to show people that I was capable. It was frustrating. I admit I did not advocate for myself. But during that period, a few organizations even told me that I was be a quote unquote good fit and I was qualified, but they just didn't know how accommodations would work. And we all know that they're not supposed to say that. And I had multiple agencies say that. I get when my clients talk about the unemployment struggles.
It's demoralizing.
It is. It's demoralizing, and it can make you feel hopeless if you receive one email. Jeff, you were talking about emails, one email after another, in regards to, hey, sorry, we chose to go with another candidate or something like that.
It's interesting too, because a lot of these jobs out there now, and I encountered this off and on when I was looking for jobs, but they require a driver. And I would still go ahead and apply. And at the interview, I would say something like, in this job description, I see no place where it requires a driver. Why are you requesting a driver?
Yep.
And can we look at, like, if you were to hire me, are there other parts of the job that I could take on from someone else who could do the driving to even it out? Because, like I said, the job I'm applying for does not state where a driver is required. I don't see that in being necessary. And I would bring it up, and of course they would get a little squirmy and blah, blah, blah. And I usually would not get the job because it was, oh, you're not licensed yet, or, oh, sorry, chose someone else and gave no reason as to why, or like Rob and I did hear that, oh, because of your blindness, we don't think this would be a good fit for you, which is illegal. But I don't think those battles are worth fighting personally, so I never did.
Even that, Beth, you advocated about the driver's license thing. And honestly, there were opportunities when I should have advocated more. So my last employer, actually, I'm on the board of directors for them now, but in all of their job descriptions, they had, or not, I don't know if all of them, but the majority of them said driver's license required. And so I knew by that point, I'm like, does it really need a driver? So I would still apply to jobs anyway. Well, apparently the job that I applied for was for an active case manager, which you really did need a driver's license for. But I really liked the recruiter to whom I was talking to, and I still give her props to this day, because when she was going over the job description and I was like, yep, I'm blind and I don't have a driver's license. So I was getting ready to end the call, and she's the one who stopped me and asked me more about myself. And then she said, hey, I may have another position doesn't have a driver's requirement.
Nice.
But not too many jobs do that. So that's why I really give you props for doing what you did, because it gives employers to think more about, does this requirement need to be in the job posting? And I know my former employer, because of my experiences, they did go back and look at the job descriptions to see if it really needed to have a driver's license.
Yeah, I think some of these, I don't know what people in human resources put together, the applications. I think it's almost like a cookie cutter, and those things are just slid in. Like, okay, we got to put this. It's a template, and it's good to look into that stuff to see if that is. The thing I would suggest is for people to take a look at jobs. One really good resource is your state is typically one of the largest employers of your state. They usually have a database of jobs that you can do a search for. So once you get onto their website, you can do a search. You'd be amazed at all the jobs that are out there. I mean, some obviously wouldn't pertain to something you're interested in, but it's something to keep a tab on once you get used to navigating that website and getting to an area that's you're interested in and learning how the keywords work. It's kind of neat to just type that in periodically to see what jobs are out there. And the state is usually a pretty good employer as far as accepting applications and letting you know dates and times. So it's something that I would keep an eye on.
I think something else to think about too is if you do happen to land a job that does require a driver and you can do it, whether it's Lyft or Uber or something like that, or you found a way to make it work, run the numbers to see if it's economically feasible for you, because there are some jobs out there where you get in the job, you're very qualified for it, but you're not making any money by the time you're paying for transportation if the job doesn't offer something as compensation. And so make it worth your time and your money, if that makes sense, because it's challenging to get into a position, you finally have a job, and then you're realizing by the time you're paying for all the expenses to do said job, you're not bringing home any money.
That does.
You could be spending 60 to 80 bucks a day on Ubers.
Yeah.
You can very, very quickly just to do your job.
That is a good point. Both of those are good points that you and Jeff made. Jeff, I do have a question. Let's say that a person doesn't know how to find state jobs. What would you suggest for them to go? How would they be able to go to that website?
I would actually go to your state gov website and do a search for careers. And they would probably bring you to a database. Like in Minnesota, ours is unique. It's mn.gov/mmb/search-for-jobs/ Or if you want to, you can contact your vocational rehab of your state, and they probably would say, yes, there's an accessible one too, or something of that nature, because they probably have that question. Their existence is to try and find jobs, so they would probably have that list for you as well. But I would say get on there, check it out. If it's not accessible, talk to the VR and make sure that it's accessible and hunt it down. Figure out, what your category you want to look into, what are the keywords that come up with the most stuff. On some of them, I know you can get notification if it's something of a specific job. Say you're looking for a teaching job, you'll learn how to navigate a lot more efficiently. And it might be something that over coffee you might want to just pull it up once in a while and see what's happening.
Yeah, that's a good one. Wow, I'm asking questions. So Beth, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Actually, you too, Jeff. So with the Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, Jeff, that you just mentioned, DVR, both of you, I know in Colorado that I do believe that DVR with the some transportation companies for those with disabilities, they'll offer vouchers. Maybe that could help with employment. I don't know if it's long term, but maybe even the DVR could help with transportation if it gets to be too costly too, depending on what state.
I could be wrong about this, but I don't think in Colorado it's a long-term solution.
Okay.
But I think it will be an option for short-term, but please don't quote me on that.
Yeah, nope, you're probably right. Yep. Okay. But it just goes to show how it's a process, and we have to keep thinking of one step after another. And that's one thing that I regularly talk about with clients too, is it can be exhausting sometimes having to think of our next step, right? I keep telling my clients to stay in the present. Okay, let's stay in the present. Well, it's hard to stay in the present, right? Because we have to think of our plan. We have to keep moving forward. So,
and I think it's good to have one foot in the present and one foot in the future when it comes to employment. Because I do think trying to be proactive and figure out, okay, what other barrier might I encounter and how can I overcome it? And I talk to a lot of clients who are like, I don't want to work outside my home. I just want to stay remote and work remote jobs. And on one hand, that eliminates a lot of barriers, i.e. transportation, but that leads to isolation for a lot of people. And so I think it's also being aware of your personality. If you're someone who likes being around people and who needs that energy and needs to get out of your house, then challenging as it might be, I would not recommend a remote job for you if it's all possible.
Or hybrid.
Exactly. And so I think remote and hybrid work is wonderful, especially when we're having transportation costs just to get to and from our job. And that can add up quickly as well. But take into account who you are personality-wise, what your circumstances are, what's your budget, and what do you want to do for work. And don't be afraid to be picky if you can afford to be picky. Having said that, it's easier to find a job when you have a job.
Yeah. That's a big one, right? And Jeff, I'm sure you can agree too, is that if you're unhappy with your current job, then look, but always have a current job before you just, so that you can still have, income coming in. That's what I tell my clients and my niece.
Yep.
Yeah.
Eddie too.
If you're unemployed, I would say take a job. But if you are in a position where you don't have to settle for a job, it's interesting how you get to these points, and sometimes you have to take the job because it's a start. And then is there upward mobility? You're going to get out and about. I would say take advantage of every opportunity you have where there's a gathering of people and you're there. Pay attention to who's who and what do they do and what fields they're in. Sooner or later, you're going to come across someone that is interesting to talk to, and it might lead to something, because I would say in today's age, what we're going through today, if you can find someone that's in a field that you like and get to know them and other people too, and spread yourself around a little bit and get noticed, I would say that's a good way to land that job at some point, because they might have a tip for you too.
And I just want to add is through, as I mentioned before, how the job process can be daunting and it can be overwhelming. So really make sure that you take care of yourself, because you don't want this process to hinder or hurt your self-confidence. If you need to take a break for a bit after applying for jobs, then so be it. But really check in with yourself, and ultimately it'll pan out. It may not feel like it in this moment. For me, it didn't feel like it right in that moment, but I kept moving forward, and ultimately I ended up getting my first job and then one after that, and so on.
And once you get your first job,
tenacity.
It's easier. Yes, tenacity, determination, persistence, perseverance, it all pays off.
Mm-hmm.
Something else that we didn't cover, and I know we're kind of winding down the episode. Once you get to the interview, I do think it's still appropriate to send a thank you note after the interview. I know some places say don't do that. I think it helps personally to keep you top of mind for the employer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think a thank you note is still a good idea personally. I also think it's important to, or it's okay to, call and check up on the status of the job. Don't harass them, but it's okay to call once a week and be like, hey, so just checking what's the status. I'm still interested in that job. Because it also keeps you top of mind, and it shows that you are willing to put the work in, so to speak.
They'll be saying, who is this person? And they'll pull it back up.
Exactly.
It's Robin again.
Right. Yeah.
I was super hopeful to get a job, because it meant that my commute would go from an hour and a half one way to about a half hour one way, and put me closer to home. And it happened to be that the supervisor of this new job I was applying for at the time was my former internship supervisor.
Oh.
And so I would send a message like every Friday at 4:00. What's the status? What's the status? Do you know how things are going? Because it was depending on when someone else left before they could actually fill the position. And she followed back and she says, I will tell you when. She's like, you have the job, just so you know, but you don't need to keep emailing me. I will let you know. So it's kind of a funny story, because it's like, okay, I didn't mean to overuse that method, but I wasn't really getting any responses except for nothing new yet. Hold on here. We don't know anything more yet. And so when she finally said, stop, I'll let you know. I was a little embarrassed by that, but I got the job, and it took about 2 months to actually start the job. And this is where it pays to have a job, because I had one, so I wasn't out the income. So just a funny story as far as that. It doesn't really backfire, but you can definitely annoy people with that method. So be mindful.
I really like the idea of that follow-up letter after an interview, because we started this off with that emptiness, that void. And it reminded me of a song, and it says something like, I was looking back to see if she was looking back to see if I was looking back at her, which is kind of cute. But when you think about it, someone that's going through the resumes and has a pile of them sitting there, all of a sudden your email comes in and says, hi, I'm Robin. I was there for the interview. Oh, they might shuffle that interview, pull that up again. Give it that second look. So you're just jarring it a little bit. You're just trying to move your resume up to the top.
Yep.
Something else I think is helpful too is Google most commonly asked interview questions for this type of position at this job. Glassdoor can be helpful for things like that. It's a website, glassdoor.com. There's other sites out there though that will give you like most commonly asked interview questions and some decent ways you can answer them to get you thinking about how you want to answer them. But prepare. Do your homework on the company and interview questions you might be asked before you show up.
Yeah, go read their mission statement. That's a huge little paragraph that you can take with you. And one of the questions that I always tell people about is, what do you need work at? You know, they always ask, what makes you think you'll do this job so good? What is one of your weaknesses? And think about that. That can be a constructive approach to how you answer that. You know, you don't have to say, I'm usually late for work. That's not a good approach to that. But you might say, I have trouble handing things off to other people to delegate because I like to have it done myself. So I'm sure that but in the past, I found out that a team works better than an island. So do a twist to that weakness that show that you're trying and you're growing. I don't know. There's so many different analogies I could use, but just put a positive spin to your weakness that it's something that you're improving on.
Yeah. And remember, you're interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you.
Thank you.
So do not be afraid to ask questions when they're done asking you questions, because you want to make sure you want to work there just as much as you want to show them that you want to work there. And you can learn a lot about, culture and workload and expectations by interviewing them as well. Yep.
There's a movie, and this one guy had to speak for another guy because he was unable to speak due to a condition. And the guy spoke up, just amazingly little speech that he gave to him. And then while they were discussing something, he turned to him and said, "Where'd you learn all that?" "I read their pamphlet in the lobby." So if you have any information, go to their website, check out their website, see what's happening lately, see if they have a newsletter, see what's going on. If they're thinking about moving to a new building in Richfield and that's closer to you or something like that. You can mention something like that, but it's like, wow, they did their homework. So that's a good point, Beth.
Yeah. And Glassdoor, Beth, you mentioned for interview questions. Also, too, Indeed, they have different interview questions and topics.
Yeah.
But I want to go back to Glassdoor because also, and here, listening to the both of you talk, it made me think of, look to see what the other employees say about working for that company to get insight to make sure that it's a good fit.
And since we're never going to end this podcast, our State Services for the Blind of Minnesota has an employment division where you can actually use a website and go and see what the future projections for these jobs are. So you can actually do some homework and see if their jobs are going up or going down. So yeah, lots of resources out there.
Don't forget the Occupational Outlook Handbook.
Lots of resources.
Yes.
Don't forget not to sell yourself short. You are very qualified. Believe in yourself. Any other parting thoughts before we end this podcast?
I got nothing.
Crickets.
All right. I hear silence. All right. As always, we want to hear from you. We all know that you've got some stories in regards to employment. So feel free to reach out to us through phone, Facebook,
LinkedIn.
Carrier pigeon.
Not Twitter, but what's the
X? Yeah.
LinkedIn. Reach out to us through X, but we definitely want to hear from you. But until next time, take care.
Well, next time, take care and stay grounded.
And as always, thanks for listening. And until next time, bye-bye.
Oh yeah, Wellness Wednesday with Beth and Robin. Gonna settle it down. Oh yeah, get your feet planted on the ground.
For more podcasts with the blindness perspective, check us out on the web at www.blindabilities.com. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you want to leave us some feedback, give us a call at 612-367-6093. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and until next time, bye-bye.
Wellness and taking care of ourselves. It's all about you and taking care of yourself.
When we share
what we see
through each other's eyes, we can then begin to bridge the gap
between the limited expectations and the realities
of blind abilities.